Video number 2 for the endocrine system in your anatomy book. I'm starting on page 325, and we are right here getting ready to start with the pituitary gland. Before we get into the hormones through the body, I want to talk about creating some kind of a tip sheet. And I would suggest that you get some paper, literally write this down. As we are going through this lecture, you're following in your textbook and you're taking notes. So pause the video anytime that you need so that you can get it written down. What I want you to do is to create yourself a study guide as we are lecturing. So the first gland we're going to talk about is the pituitary gland, and you have an anterior and a posterior. And the anterior has 6 hormones that come from it. 2 come from the posterior. So 3 columns as you're taking your notes. First column is the gland, the anterior pituitary. Next column is the hormone. And we're about to go through the 6 of them. And the third column is, what does that hormone do? What is the function? And so if I were able to print this and hand you this log that I've got on my screen, you would have it all filled in by the time we got done with lecture. Okay. And then it's a built-in study guide. Some students then take this and make flashcards from it, whether paper or digital on some website. If you're into digital flashcards, check out Quizlet. It's an amazing website. You create an account. It's free. Even though they may ask you from time to time to pay, just say no, continue free. You don't have to ever pay. You can create digital flashcards if you're more of a digital kind of person. You can also download the app and carry those flashcards with you in your pocket on your cell phone. So as we are going through this, you need to be doing this. It's the easiest way for you to master these hormones. Do you have to? Of course, I'm not going to know if you did or not. I'm not going to, stop the video. Like, it's up to you to decide this is a good study tool, but I highly recommend it. Okay. All right, back into the textbook. Okay. So the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland has 2 sides to it. We just mentioned the anterior and the posterior. And the anterior is called adenohypophysis, and the posterior is called the neurohypophysis. And this is a really interesting structure. Adeno, med term, means gland. Neuro is like brain. Okay, so this pituitary gland, half of it's glandular, half of it is brain tissue, and it's a great communication between the two. It's how the brain's going to then communicate to the glands out in the rest of the body. Okay, so there's a great communicator here. Okay, and so we're going to run through these hormones one at a time, starting with the anterior, and what do they do? What are their purpose? And you can create your cheat sheet as we go. Okay, so the first hormone we're going to talk about is called the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, it's abbreviated TSH, and its job is to tell the thyroid to release hormones. That's its whole job. So it's one of those second messengers we talked about, where this message comes from the brain to the thyroid, which is like, oh, sorry, it's right up here. And it basically is saying, okay, go, function. Okay, that's its job. So in your sheet, you're going to fill in thyroid stimulating hormone. I'm abbreviating for ease. And its job is to stimulate the thyroid. Okay, I'm not doing everyone with you. I'm just getting you going. Okay, the next one, adrenocorticotropic hormone, is abbreviated as ACTH. Its job is to stimulate the adrenal cortex. So those adrenal glands that are sitting on top of your kidneys, So this one's job is to go to the adrenal gland and say, go. Okay. Now, when we get to the adrenal gland, there are different layers. The cortex is the outside layer. So it's really just stimulating the outside layer, not the inside, but we'll get to that. Next one, follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. Its job is to go to the ovary and say, start growing. So this is our ovulating hormone. Okay. In a man, it stimulates the testicles to make sperm. So whether you're a man or a woman, the follicle stimulating hormone is the one that creates the egg or the sperm that makes the babies. So again, similar function, just a little bit different depending if you're male or female. The next one is the luteinizing hormone. The luteinizing hormone, again, is stimulating the ovary to grow to maturity. Okay. And so this one is also the ovulating hormone. In a man, it is what develops the testosterone, which is the male sex hormone. So again, it's a hormone stimulator, both male and female. The growth hormone, GH, tells the body to grow, tells the body to develop. This is a big part of puberty, where we go from being a pretty similar body between a little girl and a little boy. They're not that different. You know, they're all pretty straight. And then when you hit puberty, the girl starts getting certain curves, obviously breast development. In a boy, they start getting some more muscular development, okay? And everything kind of happens. Now, we have a lot more that happens with puberty that we'll talk about later, because this growth hormone does not fully control puberty, but it does control the growth. Anabolism is the building up of muscle, and it's the one that stimulates you to get taller as well through your growth spurts. So, two diseases they throw into here is gigantism and acromegaly. And both of these diseases are from too much growth hormone. The difference between these two diseases, however, is how that growth hormone affects the body. If this growth hormone is before puberty, it creates gigantism. And that would be somebody who's just very big, extremely tall, but everything's kind of in proportion. Acromegaly is too much growth hormone after puberty, in which case you typically are not going to get taller. So the growth hormone, it hits certain body parts, but leaves usually your arms and legs alone. So here's an example of someone, let's see what they say here. Okay, so this one is gigantism. I assume this they're saying that this is the normal and this is the extremely tall. Your arms are really tall, your legs are really tall, everything but in proportion. The next picture is someone with acromegaly. That growth hormone typically is not going to hit your extremities. It's going to hit your jaw, your nose, your hands, your feet, but usually not your arms and legs. This is a very strange disease with the extra growth hormone and how it can affect you. And of course, too little is dwarfism. These ones tend to, again, be normally proportioned, but just small. Okay. There is dwarfism from other genetic diseases, which can affect the proportions to where certain parts of them are normal sized, normal, whatever that is, and then maybe it's just their arms and legs that are short. So there's a lot of variations to dwarfism. Okay. The next hormone, we're still in the anterior pituitary, is prolactin. Prolactin creates milk for breastfeeding. Okay, so obviously female. And does it talk about what that does in a man? It doesn't even mention what it does in a man, if it does anything. I'm not sure. Maybe it just doesn't exist in a man. I don't know. It doesn't really say here. Interesting one to research. Okay, so that is the end of the anterior pituitary gland. So you should have this whole section complete now. Pause the video if you need to go back and catch anything. And now we're moving on to the posterior, and we have two hormones that come out of here. All right. The two hormones are the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Okay. Antidiuretic hormone is part of regulating our water balance in our body. And how it does that is by increasing or decreasing how much urine our body is creating. And by keeping the fluid in and not creating urine, you are holding on to that fluid, keeping you from getting dehydrated. But if you have a lot of water, people who drink this, extreme amounts of water in a day, which of course is what we should all be drinking, our body says, okay, you can go ahead and make urine. We've got plenty of fluid in our body. And so it will create increased urine output. Okay. If we have too little of this hormone, it makes a disease called diabetes insipidus. And you have to be really careful with diabetes insipidus because it is not the diabetes that you think of, that we all have heard about, or maybe we even have this disease or someone in our family does. Diabetes insipidus has absolutely nothing to do with the other kind of diabetes. So something to keep in mind. Oxytocin gets really high right before childbirth. Oxytocin is what stimulates the contractions during childbirth. Okay. And they say it also helps with the mother-baby bonding. And it's also part of our milk release. Whoops. Again, our milk letdown for breastfeeding women. And again, talks nothing about what it does in a guy. Okay. So that is the two hormones from our posterior pituitary gland. Okay. The hypothalamus is really interesting. I'm going to step back because I didn't say this. Your posterior pituitary gland stores and releases these two hormones we just talked about. However, they do not make them. They do not make those hormones. They are produced by the hypothalamus. Okay, so the hypothalamus makes it and gives it to the posterior pituitary gland just to hold on to. And when you think we need it, go ahead and put it out to the body. Okay, but they don't make it. They're just like a distributor. So the hypothalamus, of course, makes those hormones that we just talked about. Okay. They also have the releasing hormone and an inhibiting hormone. And all of these ones are these hormones that say start and stop. Release means go ahead and go. Inhibit means stop. Pull it back. We don't need it anymore. And so that's kind of what that one is doing. I'm going to stop this video here, and we will move on to the thyroid. Oh, before I hit stop. So you should now have the hypothalamus filled in as well.